Hello everybody, and welcome to Introduction to Sociology. My name is Ryan Mead, and this is the third lecture in the series going over the foundations of sociological thinking. This lecture is entitled The Sociological Perspective. In this lecture, we're going to be answering the following questions. Who are sociologists? What are the foundations of culture? What are the theoretical approaches? And how can theoretical approaches be applied to studying social phenomenon? So the first question, who are sociologists? I want to answer this question by giving the definition that my old sociology professor gave me. Professor Tom Lambert stated that sociologists are marginal. And marginal is defined as excluded from, or existing outside the mainstream of society, a group, or a school of thought. So Professor Lambert's whole philosophy was that one cannot study society if one is ingrained into society, meaning that society is illusory and it provides people a false sense of comfort to different realities that human beings must confront every single day. So he stated that sociology really is kind of like an existential crisis. An existential crisis can be defined as the moment at which an individual questions if their life has meaning, purpose, or value. And we could even extend this to the social level. So this could be the moment at which an individual questions society and whether society has meaning, purpose, or value. So Professor Lambert really focused on what he called the 7 realities. And I want to go over all of these in depth. So the first reality that human beings must confront every single day is that human beings in of themselves are insignificant. So there are currently 7.7 billion people in the world, in which you or I are just one of. Furthermore, let's say if I die today, as your teacher, I would be replaced immediately. Furthermore, while many people might be sad of my passing, within 50 years, I'm going to be forgotten. Nobody alive will know who I was. Reality 2. Human beings are cosmic orphans. In other words, we don't know where we came from, and the universe doesn't provide any answers. If we look at our planet, or better yet, our solar system, we see that our sun makes up one of approximately 400 billion stars in the Milky Way galaxy. More than that, astronomers estimate there are more than 170 billion galaxies in the universe, meaning there are approximately 10 to the 24th power stars, or a septillion stars, in the universe. Please note that this number is expanding every single day as scientists are making more and more discoveries. We are one very small part of a much larger whole. We are a speck of sand in, the universe's beach. Reality 3. Human beings are biological accidents. So, during sexual intercourse, a man can release up to 400 million sperm, and only one of them can fertilize a female egg. That result is you. Even if you were a planned child, which statistically speaking only half of the children born are planned, there is only a 1 in a 400 million chance that you ended up here the way that you are. Human beings lack instinct. This is usually the most contentious of all the realities. An instinct is defined as an innate, typically fixed pattern of behavior in animals in response to certain stimuli. So while there are many mechanisms in the human body that operate on their own, this doesn't impact behavior in human beings. Unlike other animals, humans are taught to behave. Many people argue that there are human instincts such as self-preservation. However, suicide is currently the 10th leading cause of death in the United States, with over 47,000 people claiming their own life per year. Other people say that parenting and motherhood is instinctual. However, there are roughly 638,000 legal abortions in the United States in 2015. More than that, infanticide, or the killing of a child, has been a common practice in many societies throughout history. Furthermore, every year, more than 3.6 million referrals are made to Child Protection Agency because of child neglect or abuse. 11% of women suffer from postpartum depression. Despite all this, there is, and most likely will be, a large debate within society as to whether or not there is something akin to human nature. I will not get into this debate right now, as it's long and extensive, but if anybody wants any more background on this, or wants to debate, please contact me, or comment below. Reality 5. Human beings are born meaningless. This builds on the last reality. Without instincts, we are born without a sense of end, purpose, significance, or overall meaning in our lives. Next, human beings are lonely and incomplete. This one is difficult to assess because on the one hand, building on the previous two realities, we lack instinct and meaning. However, we are also social creatures who are in constant relation with other human beings. However, that contact, as we have seen with the rise of things like social media, doesn't satiate us into contentment. Instead, we feel lonely and incomplete and never satisfied with what we have. We are always striving for more and get more in order to feel better about ourselves. We can see this in statistics on depression, where 6.7% of adults have experienced at least one major depressive episode in the past year. And the last reality. Human beings are symbol-shifting magicians. We create our own reality. This is the basis for the concept of social construction. We not only create this reality, but validate it through the creation and the shifting of symbols, such as the alphabet. This can be seen in terms of things like also not only the alphabet, but also numbers. We shift symbols not only to greatly increase social interaction, but to shield us from the harshness of the 7 realities. And this is what I want to turn to next, is how do humans deal with the 7 realities? So much of these symbols and the way we interact get codified into culture, which can be defined as the values, norms, and material goods characteristic of a given group. While culture is created and shaped by social interaction and social structures, it also shapes it, as well as social institutions. The economy, politics, religion, education, and the family are all set up in ways that shield people from the harshness of the 7 realities. So, I want to go back to the 7 realities and see how culture and our institutions protect us from that harshness of those 7 realities. So, reality 1, human beings are insignificant. 18th century Enlightenment thought in the West, and which was the philosophical foundation that the United States was founded on, places supremacy and places emphasis on the individual, thus heightening the significance of the individual. We are special. We are an individual who is special. If we look at our Declaration of Independence, we see it not only espouses claims like all men are created equal, but also we are all endowed, all of us as individuals are endowed with unalienable rights such as life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Let's look at reality 2. Human beings are cosmic orphans. Different religions throughout history are shaped by their own creation stories that provide their believers of a logical story in how they, as individuals and as a society, came to be. We can see this most clearly in the story of Genesis, which is the basis, the foundation, the creation story of the 3 monotheistic religions, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. Reality 3. Human beings are biological accidents. Culture and various institutions, particularly religion and the family, places supreme importance on children, going as far to deem them as miracles. Many religions, particularly Christianity, focuses on the concept that all children were part of God's plan, and God has a supreme role not only in their creation but molding. Reality 4. Human beings lack instinct. Culture does not dispute the fact that human beings lack instinct, but instead create laws to either suppress or encourage those supposed instincts. Reality 5. Human beings are born meaningless. Social institutions are set up in a way to create meaning for individual people. Religion tells us that that meaning is to serve God, while political institutions tell us that our meaning is to serve the governing body. The family is provided with meaning, which is to raise, care for, and socialize the next generation, while the economy provides us with meaning regarding producing goods and services not only to survive, but also to get rich off of. Reality 6. Human beings are lonely and incomplete. Culture and its institutions do all they can to make people not feel lonely and incomplete, because society cannot run if everybody is experiencing this existential crisis. When cultural institutions are unable to provide that meaning, we will fill these voids through things like buying stuff or even taking drugs to overcome those feelings. Reality 7. Human beings are symbol-shifting magicians. Cultural institutions always attempt to present themselves as natural and true. They do this by telling people that there is the right way, while other people's way is wrong. We see this most clearly in religion. But we can also see this in politics, not only in the Republican-Democrat divide, but also the divide between different governing institutions such as democracy, authoritarianism, and socialism. The majority of the time, the fact that all of these institutions and the meaning behind them are produced by humans becomes lost by this in-group, out-group mentality. But there are numerous times throughout history when individuals or groups attempt to pull back the veil of this socially constructed reality in an attempt to present it as the work of these symbol-shifting magicians. So now I want to move on to another question. We looked at how do humans and human societies deal with the 7 realities, particularly through the construction of culture and cultural institutions or social institutions. But how do sociologists deal with the 7 realities? Sociologists are all too familiar with the 7 realities, and while they have spent parts of their lives under the influence of culture and how culture has shaped their worldview and hidden such realities, their profession deems that they no longer can do this. Instead, they are marginal, and they stand on the outskirts of society, culture, and its institutions. To deal with the harshness of the 7 realities, sociologists look from the outside in, and instead study how society deals with these realities and the social relations and institutional practices that are formed through this. Which leads me to another question. How do sociologists seek to understand how human groups and their cultures react to the 7 realities? Well, there's 3 ways. The first is questioning society, questioning why things are the way they are. Second is, after that questioning, developing a theoretical approach as to why things are the way they are. And third is devising a method to study those social phenomena, to see why things are the way they are, and carry out that study. In the rest of this lecture, I want to focus on the theoretical approach and really see how sociologists develop these theories as a way to study social phenomenon as well as institutions. So, a theoretical approach. This could be defined as a group of statements formulated to explain, predict, and understand the phenomenon. It's a logically structured representation of social phenomenon, its parts and relationships with the purpose of explaining the causes of its phenomenon, its resolution, and its larger impact. In other words, it's kind of like a worldview. It's a logically structured worldview. Why are the things the way they are? How theoretical approaches strengthen studies. Providing a theoretical approach will help the reader to evaluate assumptions in the study, to study them critically. The theoretical approach allows the researchers to link a study to an existing body of knowledge. And theoretical approaches provide boundaries to what is being studied and how it is being studied. So what are some common theoretical approaches? First, there's symbolic interactionism. People using this approach focus on the symbolic meaning that people develop and rely on through social interaction. Then there's functionalism, which is sometimes called structural functionalism. This emphasizes that social phenomenon can be best explained by the functions they perform and the role they play to ensure the stability of a society. Many functionalists, particularly in the 19th century, looked at society as an organism in which each part benefited the whole. Then there's the conflict theories, most notably Marxism, which is a perspective that centralizes the economic component, while at the same time explaining sociological phenomenon through the conflict posed by two conflicting classes, the ruling class and the ruled class. There's also feminism, which is a perspective that focuses on society through how gender is created and defined, as well as the inequalities that are structured through that creation and definition. There's also rational choice theory. This is an approach that posits that the individual operates in purposeful, rational ways, thus explaining social interaction through the use of rational actors and explanations. And then there's postmodernism, an approach that argues against the notion that a singular theoretical approach can explain sociological phenomenon. In other words, it denies that we can use any approach to explain. Instead, it believes in a highly pluralistic and diverse society. Furthermore, it's an approach that does away with the belief in the importance of history, particularly historical progress. Now, what I've said to you is probably very, very abstract, and if you're new to this, you might not have an idea of how any of these approaches can be applied to any sort of social phenomenon. So, for the rest of this lecture, I want to work in applying these sociological perspectives or theoretical approaches to a particular social institution, the family. So let's look first at functionalism. As we noted, functionalism is a theoretical perspective based on the notion that social events can be explained in terms of the functions that they perform. It emphasizes things like roles, reproduction, social cohesion, moral consensus, order, and balance. Some important theorists are Emile Durkheim, Talcott Parsons, and Robert K. Merton. But what about functionalism in the family? Functionalists who study the family look at the social functions that the family performs as it relates to larger society. So, first of all, families perform the function of reproducing society with new members, i.e., children. Second, families provide care and protection to children. They socialize children into society's norms. They teach children how to act and behave within society. They place control on sexual behaviors as well. They stabilize the social order. Many people will note that, society becomes very disordered without marriage as a way to stabilize people. Now, what about the roles of the family? We look at the father, Functionalists usually look at the father as being something as an authoritarian and also the breadwinner. They provide for the family as well as lead the family. They provide the family with income. The mother is usually, to a functionalist, is looked on as a nurturing homemaker. They clean, cook, rear children, etc., etc. Children are meant to obey and listen to the parents. And again, this is taken, from mid-20th century functionalist theorists. And there's a lot of problems with this viewpoint. First of all, functionalism doesn't take into account diversity of families. They look at families as husband, wife, and a few kids. They tend to promote and make normal that nuclear family. They don't look at single family, single parent households. They don't look at LGBTQ family households. They don't look at extended households. They don't look at the vast diversity that families have shown, that the different types of families that have come up through history have posed to that nuclear family. They discount the conflict that arises within families, and we're going to get into conflict theory in a little bit. Next, we want to look at social interactionism. As we noted, social interactionism is defined as using symbols, particularly the symbols construction and utilization, as a way to understand the core elements of human interaction. They emphasize things like language, symbols, and interaction. Important theorists are George Herbert Mead, Herbert Blumer, Charles Horton Cooley, and Irving Goffman. So let's look at some things of the symbolic interactionism in the family. Ernest Burgess in the 1920s defined the family as, quote, a unity of interacting personalities. So symbolic interactionists who study the family usually focus on the contextual and subjective nature of family interaction, power relations, and communication. They look at how family members define, negotiate, and redefine their roles in the family context. And they look at the development of family narratives to construct and maintain family roles. So unlike functionalists, who each family member had a specific role that they played, symbolic interactionists see how those roles are continually formed and transformed through interaction with others. So, the role of the mother is constantly being formed and transformed in relationship to, their partner, their spouse, as well as to their children. But there's a lot of criticisms of symbolic interactionism, especially through the family. Critics will say that by focusing on small-scale interactions within the family, symbolic interactionists miss the larger issues and forces shaping those interactions, such as economics or politics. We know that one of the leading causes of divorces is financial institutions, or financial strain, which in turn we can see being structured through practices of financial institutions in the larger economy. Critics will claim that symbolic interactionist places too much focus on negotiation, cooperation, and consensus between family members, while ignoring ongoing conflict as well as power relations. And critics will say that there's a lack of attention to gender differences and power relations and how that influences roles and interaction within the family. So far we've looked at functionalism and how functionalists study the family, as well as how symbolic interactionists study the family. Now I want to look at how Marxists and conflict theorists study the family. As we know, that conflict theory is defined as the idea that conflict between competing interests is the basic animating force of social change and society in general. And Marxism sees the central conflict in society as stemming from conflict between the capitalist class, or those who own the means of production, and the working class, or those who sell their labor to the capitalists. So, here they look at how power is both exerted and resisted, and how power and resistance involves both direct force as well as ideologies or ideas. So these two things are really important. How is power formed within the family, and how is it resisted? And how, not only is it resisted directly, but through ideas. So let's look at this more in depth. The foundations of conflict in the family stem from power within the family. Who holds that power? Conflict can arise when family members without power threaten those family members with power. So if we look at parents as holding the power, conflict can arise when children who don't have power can threaten the power of those parents. Areas of conflict for family, gender, age, etc. So it's not only in terms of age, children and parents, but also too, what about, if the family is composed of a husband and a wife, and what happens if the wife is without power and she tries to gain power from the husband? Conflict will arise there as well. And here we have that gender conflict, the gender division of labor and dependency. Feminists usually look at the nuclear family as a male-dominated institution. It's something where women lack power. And that, the only way to get power is to challenge what they say is the patriarchy of that male authoritarian breadwinner. Age conflict. Here we see unequal resources between parents and children as a source of conflict. And also children will capitalize on the few resources they possess, such as physical attractiveness and athleticism, as a way to gain favor with different parents as well as different family members. So in conclusion, we went over the following. Who are sociologists? We looked at the 7 realities and how humans protect themselves from the 7 realities, and how sociologists study society through theoretical approaches. So I hope this all made sense. If it didn't, you could always contact me or post a question in the comments below. I look forward to seeing you the next time. Goodbye.